I had a hockey coach when I was younger who said to me all the time that there's no such thing as can't when I would tell him that I can't do many of the things that he asked me to do. So with us today is Mick Ebeling. Mick Ebeling has a company, has a business, has a life based on the fact that you can. It's called Not Impossible Labs. Mick, thanks for being on Reasonably Sure. When I saw Not Impossible Labs, also, the acronym NIL, right? Nil, zero, right? That couldn't have been lost on you, right?
It was, I have to say that was a happy accident. It worked out perfect, but we're glad that it was.
What takes a person from, and we're going to discuss all the things that you do at Not Impossible, some of the things you've done before that happened. What takes you to saying, what kind of person is it that says that's possible?
Well, it was actually taking me to say that's not impossible, or I have to make that not impossible. And it was, I think, just this aggregate. I was a producer, you know, so my job was essentially, to boil that down, was just people would throw something at you and you just say, yep, we'll figure it out. And then you hang up the phone and you're like, oh my God, I have no idea how I'm gonna feel like.
And when you say you were producing commercials, you were producing films?
I had a focus in animation and design, so I was doing commercials, films, main titles for James Bond films. So we were doing some awesome stuff.
Quantum of Solace.
Quantum of Solace, yeah. And so we were at the top of our game, and then at a certain point, it wasn't like this light, shone from the sky, and all of a sudden I had this, moment. But I just got to the point where I was like, I gotta do something else. I gotta figure out something else that I can do that's gonna be a little bit more meaningful.
Was it about seeing people in need and saying, I want to help them? Was it about, we all have our heartstrings tugged on from time to time, right? But this takes it to a different level, Mick.
Well, while there wasn't like that one moment that all of a sudden I said, I have to change this, there was a moment where I met a guy who, well, I actually didn't meet the guy. I went to an art benefit in Culver City, where you guys are based here, right around the corner. And it was this incredible exhibit. And afterwards I said to my buddy who took me there, I'd love to meet the artist. He said, oh, you can't meet the artist because this is a benefit. And it's for an artist who has ALS. And this is all his friends and family coming together to help pay his hospital bills. And that led me to discover this artist named Tony Tempt One. And that kind of led to the realization that most people with paralysis don't have access to the things that you and I see when we see people on television, or whenever we're watching something. They always have some kind of device that helps them talk. Well, those people are not everybody. And when I learned that, I was like, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. We live in Los Angeles with a GMP greater than most developing nations, and there's a dude who lives 13 miles away from where I live in Venice Beach, and I found out he was talking through a piece of paper. There was a piece of paper with the alphabet. His family or caretaker would run his finger along and get to a letter, and then he would blink, and then they would write it down. Right. So you see Stephen Hawking with this device that talks for him, and you see this guy who's talking through a piece of paper, and I was like, wait a second, that just doesn't make sense. And so that was the moment where I was like, all right, we gotta change this.
And that's what sets you apart. And I'm not saying it to like just shower you with flattery here, because what I'm saying it is somebody who would see that, me, and feel awful about it, but not say, how do I develop the technology to make this easier for you, right? So that's what sets you apart. And what is it? Were you always that person, or did it really happen at a gallery? Tempt One, we should say, is a graffiti artist, and what you have done with your technology that came to him led to the iWriter, and the iWriter basically allows this artist, who you saw by serendipity here in Culver City, to be able to create art again.
Yeah. The answer to the question is, I'm sure I was always headstrong. You have to get my mom on the show, and she could probably answer you that. But I was always been headstrong, and then I think learning to be a producer, where it's kind of, you figure it out no matter what. I think that's kind of the aggregate, probably, experience of my life that led me to that. And now the funny thing is that, one of the mantras, we've got certain things that we live by at Not Impossible, and one of those is commit and then figure it out. And so that's kind of like the underpinning of how we tackle all the projects we do.
And the projects do you get mail every day that's like, hey, I'm this guy and I'm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I can't walk and I used to be a farmer? I mean, do you get those sorts of stories?
Yeah, I don't know. I left my phone over there before the interview, but it gives a lot of people a lot of anxiety. But if I showed you the number of emails that are unread right now that we just have to kind of wade through, it's pretty tremendous. But we get a lot of emails coming in, but we also get a lot of things where you start to, the example is, what was the first car you ever drove in like, what was your very first car?
Mine was a Jeep Wagoneer, a used Jeep Wagoneer.
Okay, by the way, awesome car, right? So
I wish I had it back.
If you and I were driving in a car and you were driving and you looked over and I was looking at you and you looked past me and a Jeep Wagoneer came up, you'd be like, oh my God, look at that. That was my first car, and you'd evoke all these memories. Right. I didn't have a Jeep Wagoneer, so I'd look over and it wouldn't mean anything to me. Once you start seeing the world through this lens of, wait a second, everything that you think is impossible actually isn't. It's just impossible for right now. And there's gonna be a time and a place where we can transition it from impossible to not impossible. All of a sudden you start to see things through this lens of like, wait a second, what if we did it this way? And what if we did it that way? So it becomes kind of you kind of live in a video game of possibility.
Is that contagious, what you're talking about? Have people who have become a part of what you're doing sort of learned that? Is it an acquired thing, or is it something that you have because you're Mick Ebeling?
I think it's one of those things. The second you start to see the world through that lens, then you start to understand like, wow, this is actually this isn't just some made up hocus pocus thing. Right. I mean, look, this is the stat we always throw out to everybody. Look around the studio right now. Look at what you're wearing. Look around. Everything around us at one point was impossible, right? That's not, we're not gonna give you Guyana Punch and white Nikes right now, but then if everything around us was impossible, but it's possible now, then everything that you think of that you can contemplate that's impossible, statistically, is on, if history repeats itself, if history is the predictor, everything that's impossible is on the trajectory of becoming possible. So you're like, okay. And I think it's kind of a somewhat narcissistic way of thinking if you think like, okay, Mick, I've finally discovered the one thing this is gonna be impossible forever, and it has to do with me, and it's my story, and it's like, well, no, that's not gonna be the way it is.
It's a little different. Yeah. Is it annoying being you sometimes?
It's totally annoying being me sometimes.
Yeah.
It's actually annoying, I think, hanging out with me sometimes, because people are like, oh, that's really highly improbable that could happen.